Hi everybody, and welcome to Big Joe's Journal. My name is Joe Tilden, and I am the host of this program. Well, this week we celebrate the Feast of Thanksgiving, and this will be the 398th Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving originally, of course, began in 1621 in Plymouth, Massachusetts. And our pilgrim forefathers and foremothers or whatever, when they landed at Plymouth in 1620, they were greeted by an Indian chief who said, "Welcome Englishmen," or "Hail Englishmen," which means that prior to the pilgrims, somebody else who spoke English had landed on those shores. It probably John Cabot's numerous voyages to explore the eastern coast of North America. John Cabot, his real name was Giovanni Cabati. He was Italian, but in those days, professional mariners, if you will, they contracted out to different countries. And so this gentleman was contracted to England, and he anglicized his name to John Cabot. And he made, at least that we know, 3 voyages to explore the eastern coast of what is now North America. And he may have landed at a number of areas. Obviously he did, because otherwise how would the Native American chief who greeted the pilgrims be able to greet them in English? So he must have landed there for a little bit and then moved on. But there are no written records of any major stops or anything, any lasting effects of John Cabot's landings on the east coast of North America. But at any rate, the Pilgrim Fathers landed in 1620, and they were welcomed by the Native Americans that were living there. And the Pilgrim Fathers that landed there, they had a tough time getting used to the land, getting used to the climate. When the Pilgrims set sail out of England, Plymouth, England, they had planned to land somewhere down around Virginia or down in the Carolinas, where it was a little bit warmer. But you know, they didn't have modern compasses and all that in those days, and so crossing the North Atlantic, they drifted off course a bit, and they landed in what is now Plymouth, Massachusetts. And they stepped on the rock, you know, Plymouth Rock, and onto the shore. If you've ever been down, you've seen Plymouth Rock. It's got a big, big railing around it, and you look down and you say, my God, they stepped on that stone, and then on the land, you know, the seas must have been calm when they did it. But they had a tough time adjusting to this climate over here, and the Native Americans welcomed them, and fortunately for the Pilgrims, they were very, very friendly to them. And they taught them how to grow crops that would thrive in this particular area. There were potatoes and corn and stuff like that, so that the colony wouldn't starve to death. Well, after a year, 1621, the Pilgrims, who were of the Puritan faith, Christian faith, decided to offer thanks. And thanks to their Native American friends who had helped them survive the winter and get set in the spring. And so that first Thanksgiving, everybody was all together and thanking the Lord and so forth and so on. Well, as the year passed, Plymouth colony grew larger. More and more people emigrated over from England, settled in the area. They needed more land. Well, the only way to get more land is to take the land that belonged to the people that are already there, Native Americans. And the result was that this goodwill and everything that had been there the first year didn't last into the second year. In fact, the Pilgrims, if you will, took this land from the Native Americans. And in so doing, they captured the chief that had been very, very friendly to them at the start, and they beheaded him. So Thanksgiving number 2, that the Pilgrims celebrated by themselves without their former Native American friends, with one exception, and that was the head of the chief who had helped them a year ago. His head was on a stake and planted in the center of what is now Plymouth Village, Plymouth, Massachusetts. And so that was our second Thanksgiving. And it went on from there. Well, Thanksgiving, of course, over the years has become the start of the holiday season. And it's a big commercial time. In fact, many of your merchants, if they're going to make it financially for the year, this is the season when they have to do it. Sales have to pick up. And so we have the Friday after Thanksgiving that's become known as Black Friday. I don't know why they call it Black Friday. Seems to me it'd be more appropriate to call it Green Friday. Seems to be a big day when people are out shopping. And some people have gotten greedy enough where they'll open their stores on Thanksgiving to allow people to get a head start on their Christmas shopping. People seem to forget the purpose of the holiday season when we sort of commemorate the Nativity of Christ. But that's shoved into the background in our modern civilization, and the big thing is, what can you get for Christmas? Buy a new car, get all kinds of toys, all sorts of junk. It's a big commercial thing, and it's promoted commercially, of course, on television and the newspapers and all that. And Black Friday will be a big shopping day. The days leading up to Thanksgiving, the heaviest travel days of the year. People going to visit family. Thanksgiving in itself still retains that feeling of a family holiday. And, we go back a number of stories on Thanksgiving. There's a story written by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow called The Courtship of Miles Standish. When the Pilgrim Fathers came over here and landed, they hired a mercenary, an old soldier by the name of Miles Standish, to sort of come and maybe do guard duty and all that, because they didn't know what they were going to run into over here. Well, in the course of being here, old Miles Standish fell in love with a young lady named Priscilla. But obviously not being an educated man and not having had a lot of experience courting nice ladies, he didn't quite know what to say and how to approach Priscilla. So he enlisted the aid of a young man by the name of John Alden. And he asked John to say all the nice words, that young ladies like to hear and so forth. And at least as a man, we think it's what they like to hear. And so John Alden did his bit, told Priscilla how much old Miles Standish loved her and so forth. Well, she listened to it for a while, and then she finally said, "John Alden, why don't you speak for yourself?" Well, John Alden did, and he too was in love with Priscilla. She didn't give a hoot and holler for old Miles Standish, who was probably old enough to be her grandfather. And she and John Alden were married, and thus you have the story of the failed courtship of Miles Standish, but the very successful courtship of John Alden, the story of John and Priscilla Alden. There are a number of great English poets and writers in the New England area in the 19th century. You go way back through, almost to colonial times and post-colonial times, where you have Ralph Waldo Emerson, you have David Thoreau, who is sort of the patron saint now of our modern-day environmentalists, who wrote about his life on Walden Pond in Massachusetts. He went back to the basics. And of course, we've had many imitators since then, and he's sort of, if you will, the patron saint of hippies, or modern hippies. Well, there's Emily Dickinson, who lived around Springfield, Massachusetts, in that area, and her poems, which are known worldwide. And there's also John Greenleaf Whittier, lived about the same time as Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. You know, Longfellow wrote the well-known poem, The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere, probably his most famous work. But John Greenleaf Whittier wrote a poem, and I can't recall the whole thing, but it's definitely a Thanksgiving poem. And it goes, over the river and through the woods to grandmother's house we go. The horse knows the way as he drags the sleigh over the glistening snow. And I've forgotten the rest of it. But very nice Thanksgiving poem by John Greenleaf Whittier. Over the woods, over the river and through the woods to grandmother's house we go. The horse knows the way as he hauls the sleigh over the glistening snow, so forth. Thanksgiving became a national holiday back around 1864, 1865. Abraham Lincoln, excuse me, declared it a national holiday to be celebrated on the last Thursday in November. Well, during World War II, Franklin Roosevelt changed it, and it moved to the third Thursday in November. And the reason for this was the number of troops that were in boot camp, in basic training. Just before they shipped overseas in January, February, some were allowed to come home for Thanksgiving. And another group that had to stay in camp over Thanksgiving were allowed to come home for Christmas. Well, following the conclusion of World War II, Harry Truman moved it back to the last Thursday in November, which is when we celebrate it now. And this year, we have a rather short season between Thanksgiving and Christmas. The merchants are not overly happy about it. They like a longer season, figuring they'll get more buyers and sell more merchandise. But that's the breaks in the calendar this year. Other things take place on Thanksgiving. Well, traditionally, of course, what's the big feast? The big feast is turkey. And of course, there's the old tradition where the president pardons one turkey, supposedly saving it from execution, and that turkey goes to spend the rest of its life somewhere on a turkey sanctuary where it won't wind up on anybody's Thanksgiving or Christmas table. But turkey seems to be the main feast. There's also pumpkin and all that sort of thing. Thanksgiving, we have the Marcy's Day Parade. And parade's a big parade in Toronto, up in Canada, even though it's U.S. Thanksgiving, and in Chicago and around different areas of the country, and people welcome Santa Claus. It's amazing how many different places Santa Claus can appear on the same day. But it means the biggest commercial season of the year is underway. And it'll run right through to Christmas, and then after Christmas, there comes the big gift exchange period in time. So holidays are with us, and we'll see what we can do with them. Well, one thing Congress agrees on, that is when it's vacation time. And so Thanksgiving week, Congress has gone home for their Thanksgiving vacation. They will return for a short session before they go on vacation again for Christmas and the New Year. One of the things, of course, as you know, that have been taking place is what they call the impeachment hearings regarding the current president. And the House Intelligence Committee has been holding hearings. First of all, a number of them were in secret, and then public hearings all last week on TV. If you tuned in any of the major networks and all that, that's what you got. Were the hearings in front of the House Intelligence Committee, where Democrats friendly to the witnesses and Republicans going after them, sort of defending the president. One of the Republicans that surprised me was Elise Stefanik. Congresswoman from northern New York State. For a long time, she was one of the Republicans that did not support Donald Trump. Excuse me. But hearing these hearings, she has done an about-face. And she has become one of his strongest supporters in these hearings. So, it's kind of interesting, what took place behind the scenes. And why did she change? Well, a young lady, and she's got political ambitions, and maybe someone tipped her off that she would go much further in Republican ranks if she came on board and supported the president instead of knocking him. And so that's the route she has gone. Now, how this is going to affect her re-election in the 21st Congressional District, which is northern New York State, remains to be seen. But that was a big change. And of course, the people testifying were not professional politicians. They were people who had served in the State Department or in our Foreign Service for a number of years. And they were not attached to either political party. And so their testimony was honest and was above board. It was, as far as I can see, very, very correct. One of the gentlemen testifying is our ambassador to the European Union. He got his ambassadorship by contributing $1 million to the Donald Trump inauguration committee. And Trump gave him the ambassadorship to the European Union. Well, he goes and he testifies, and his testimony was, I thought, very honest and very truthful and very forward. Well, a man who would go on the phone with Trump, and they would exchange conversations using 4- and 3-letter words that you wouldn't use in polite society. They were buddy-buddy. All of a sudden, this guy goes and he testifies before Congress, and Trump said, well, I hardly know him. I may have run into him somewhere, but I don't know him, Old Trumpy lying his way out again. And he tweets and he lies and he tweets and he lies. And, well, he probably tells more lies in a day than the devil himself could come up with in that same amount of time. He lies so much he can't remember what he lied about 5 minutes ago. But on this impeachment thing, the House Intelligence Committee will drop a report, and it has to go to the House Judiciary Committee. It's the House Judiciary Committee that will determine whether there's enough evidence to have an impeachment inquiry in the total House, the House voting to impeach. Well, it's a Democratic-controlled House, so if the House Judiciary Committee says, yeah, there appears to be enough evidence to impeach, the House will impeach him. Then, of course, he has to be tried in the Senate. And the Senate at that time will be presided over by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, not the Vice President of the United States. And a Republican-controlled Senate, I doubt very much that they're going to impeach Donald Trump, or they're going to convict Donald Trump. He will be impeached, as was Bill Clinton and Andrew Johnson. Richard Nixon was not impeached. He would have been, but he resigned before it had gone that far. And so I think Trumpy will be impeached. They plan to hold a vote before they go home for Christmas, and then the trial in the Senate, of course, would take place in January. In order to convict, they need 67 senators. There are 47 Democrats, 53 Republicans. That means 20 Republicans would have to jump ship and come over and vote with the Democrats in order for impeachment to take place, to get those 67 votes. And that is just not going to happen. I think they will get a few Republicans. I think maybe Mitt Romney from Utah, possibly one or two senators from Maine. They might get 4 or 5 Republicans. About 52 will be 15 short of the 67 they need. Susan Collins, of course, of Maine, I think she would come over and vote for impeachment, or vote to convict on impeachment. But is there enough evidence to impeach? Well, the second article of the Constitution talks about the presidency. And there's a small section here that I think they're going to have to base, if they're going to impeach, they're going to have to base it on. It says the president shall at stated times receive for his services a compensation which shall neither be increased nor diminished during the period for which he shall have been elected, and he shall not receive within that period any other emolument from the United States or from anywhere else. Okay. On that basis alone, we know that Trump is making money hand over fist. Let's see here. There's another thing here I want to read here. Talks about the powers and what the president can do. The trial of all crimes, except in cases of impeachment, shall be by jury. Okay, the judicial power. I want to read this section here, which is rather fine and limits, what authority you can impeach the president for. The judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity arising under this Constitution, the laws of the United States, and treaties made or which shall have been made under their authority, in all cases affecting ambassadors and so forth and so on. In all cases, all right, well, let's get down to here now. I don't believe there's a possibility of treason, if Trump has some sort of thing with Mr. Putin. But it says here, treason against the United States shall consist only in leveling war against them or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. No person shall be convicted of treason unless on the testimony of 2 witnesses to the same overt act or on confession in open court. Congress shall have the power to declare the punishment of treason, but no attender of treason shall work corruption of blood or forfeiture except during the life of the person attainted. Now, you can't just come up and say, well, we're going to impeach the president for this, that, and the other thing. You got to prove it. And the thing that they were looking at as far as treason is concerned, or not treason, but impeachment is concerned, is the idea of withholding military aid to Lithuania, not Lithuania, but Ethiopia, or not Ethiopia either, Ukraine. Asking Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden for possible corruption, the result of being his son Hunter serving on a large oil company over in Ukraine. And apparently, Rudy Giuliani, who is Trump's wacko lawyer, has been heading up that particular detail. And it's on that basis that the House of Representatives feels that they may have enough ground to bring articles of impeachment against the president. But if you look at the Constitution, you know, it narrows that down quite a bit. And they would have to prove in no uncertain terms that Trump deliberately withheld military aid until he got the government of Ukraine, or the president of Ukraine, to begin an investigation of the Bidens. And you know, you look at this and you're skating on pretty thin ice. I think the Democrats do have a case, but is it a case for total impeachment right now? Is it strong enough? I honestly don't think it is, to be honest with you. What he did was dishonest. But Donald Trump is a dishonest man. Been a crook all his life. He's a crook, he's a bully. He's everything that is despicable about a human being. But that's the one that this country mistakenly elected in 2016 to be the President of the United States, and we paid the price for it. So I think the big thing, if the House does vote to impeach, I think it's going to be very, very, as I say, thin ice. And the Senate, of course, will never vote to convict. So the result is that Trump will be crowing about that, I'm sure, lying about it, putting a twist on it like he does everything else. Denies up and down that he lost the popular vote to Hillary Clinton, which he did, by a very wide margin. And this thing will continue on, and it will be settled in the People's Court. Namely, a year from now, when we go to the polls and we elect, or we vote for, we actually vote for electors who represent the different parties, and we'll meet in Washington to actually elect a president. One of the big drawbacks that's going to cause an awful lot of controversy, and it already has, and that is, do we need an electoral college? Should it be the popular vote that determines who's elected president instead of the electoral vote? Well, if it had been the popular vote, Hillary Clinton would now be the 45th president of the United States. But back when the Constitution was drawn up as a compromise, Alexander Hamilton and people from New York did not think that the average voter, and at that time the average voter was a male property owner, had enough intelligence to make a good decision on who should be president. That this had to be certain people that maybe were more qualified or more into it, if you will. And so the Constitution set up the electoral vote. And the electoral vote is set up by the number of representatives that each state has in Congress. That's the number of electoral votes you get. So, for example, the state of Vermont has 3 electoral votes. And when you go and vote, what you are voting for, if you vote Republican, you're voting for 3 Republican electors. Democrat, 3 Democratic electors, and so forth. In December, the electors from all the states will meet in Washington in the House of Representatives. This will be, or I believe, yeah, it'll be in the House, but it will be presided over by the Vice President, and they will cast their ballots for President of the United States. Well, in 2016, although Trump lost the popular vote, he did win the electoral vote, and thus he became president. We saw it with George Bush in the year 2000. And we've had other close elections where the Electoral College has decided who's going to be president. An ancestor of mine, back in 1876, the governor of New York, Samuel J. Tilden, the Electoral College cost him the presidency. So with that, we're going to wrap up and wish you all a very, very Happy Thanksgiving and a very safe traveling if you got to travel. And may Almighty God in His infinite wisdom continue to bless these United States of America. See y'all next week, and have a great Thanksgiving.